Shalom. With your permission, we will say a few words, a few thoughts regarding the Parashat on the coming Shabbat, Parashat Vayeshev Yakov. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz megure aviv be'eretz Canaan, which means, and Yaakov settled finally in the land of his fathers, in the land of Canaan, the Holy Land. Now we know that Yaakov went through years of terrible miseries. We understand that Yaakov suffered very much in life. First, he had to leave the house of his parents, Rivka and Yitzchak, who sent him away because of the hatred that Esav, his brother, the brother of Yakov, felt for Yakov. We all know the story that Yakov acquired the Bechorah, the birthright, which was of Esav. It became now the right of Yaakov. And Esav is the one who did it, and yet he hated Yaakov for that, especially at the time when Isaac gave his blessing to Yaakov, thinking that he is Esav. So apparently it means that Yaakov stole away the blessing of his father from Esav. For that, Esav swore hatred towards his brother Yaakov, and he said, "Ikrevu yeme evel avi ve'aharga et Yaakov ahi." When the days of his father Yitzchak will come to an end, when they will come close to the end, he will kill his brother Yaakov. Since then, Yaakov was in danger, to the point that his mother Rivka told him, "Go away to my brother LaVon in the country of Haran," which is outside the land of Israel. And also his father Yitzchak told him to go out to find a wife. So based on those requirements that came from his own parents, so he left. Yaakov Avinu left. Where to be? First, according to the tradition of our sages, he went to Yeshiva of Shem Va'ever. He spent 14 years learning their Torah, the Torah of then, of course, not the Torah that we have, but the Torah that came from the Yeshiva of Shem and Ever, according to our tradition. And then he went to the house of LaVon to find a wife. That's where he found Rachel. He fell in love with her, and he was willing to work for LaVon for 7 years so that he can have Rachel as a wife. But then LaVon, the wicked, the tricky person, after the 7 years that Yaakov worked for free, just to have the right to marry Rachel, LaVon made sure that he gave him Leah rather than giving him Rachel, right? And when Yaakov complained, "Why did you do this to me?" So he says, you have to start with the older one, and Leah is older than Rachel, according to our understanding, and therefore take her first, and then you can take, with another seven years, you can take Rachel. So imagine that Yaakov had to spend over 21 years. It should be only 14, but it happened that they became 21 years, so that he became the husband of Leah and as well as Rachel. Those were not years that were easy for Yaakov. And at the end, he left LaVon. Those were years of miseries, because what is the misery that was for Yaakov in the house of LaVon? It's because LaVon was an idol worshipper, a man without much derech eretz. I mean, he was known in our tradition as a person who is very tricky. And Yaakov, on the other hand, was a man of holiness, of righteousness. How can he live in this kind of surrounding and stay there many years without being influenced. And thank God, we know that when Yaakov encountered his brother Esav, he sent first his emissaries telling to Esav, Im LaVon Gertie va'echar ad ata, that I lived with LaVon. So what? Our sages said, Gertie brings the word Tariyak, Tafresh Yud Gimal, 613 mitzvot, saying that Yaakov is telling Esav, I want you to know that despite the fact that I had to live with LaVon, nevertheless I made sure I kept all the commandments, the 613 commandments that were given to the Jewish people in the future, and given to very few people, among them our forefathers, as known in the tradition of our sages. So, he had to go through the misery of LaVon, and then the misery, first Esav, of course, the persecution of Esav, and the fear from Esav, then to stay with LaVon, then he had the terrible misery of Dena, the daughter of Yakov, the only daughter that he had, Dena, who was captured by Shechem, the son of Hamor, a non-Jewish person, and she was raped by him, and he wanted her. And we know the whole story that, as we read in last week's Parashat Vayeshev. So we understand that Yaakov went through many kinds of miseries. Finally, when he met Esav, and thank God the encounter between him and Esav ended well, with a renewal of love rather than the hatred that it was before. As we know, as we said in last week's parasha, now finally Yaakov returns to the Holy Land, the land of Canaan, and to live in the country of in the place of his father Yaakov, Yitzchak. So we understand that everything is nice now. So our sages see that, the Torah says that now finally Yaakov is settling down. Finally he wants to take a respite from everything that he went through. And for a righteous man like Yaakov, we understand that he wanted to sit down and learn Torah and worship the Almighty God with all his heart. Nevertheless, kafatz alav rugzo shel Yosef. Our sages say, bikesh Yaakov liyishev beshalva. Yaakov wanted finally to rest from everything that he went through. Now jumps upon him the worst kind of miseries, the misery that came because of Yosef. What happened? So the Torah tells us that Yosef was the younger son of Yakov. Yakov showed him seemingly a little more love than the rest of his brothers. The rest of his brothers, they all came either from Leah, either from Bilhah or Zilpah, mostly from Leah. But Yosef was the only one who came from Rachel before the birth of Binyamin, of course. So what happened? Since Rachel was the most beloved one for Yaakov, so obviously and naturally, Yaakov allowed himself to show a little bit of love more to Yosef than to the other brothers. How? So the Torah tells us in our parasha, ve'asa lo ketonet pasim. He made for him a special tunic, a beautiful kind of garment, and that gave an idea to the brothers that their father is favoring Yosef above all of them. There is more into this, because we have the tradition that all the 11 tribes of the Jewish people were very, very righteous. Each one of them. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zevulun, Gad, Naphtali, Gad ve'Asher, and Yosef. All of these were extremely righteous. No question about it. The problem is that there was jealousy. Jealousy came upon them when they saw that Yaakov, their father, seems to be giving more attention to Yosef. Our sages said that Yosef was also a pupil of Yaakov. Yaakov taught all the Torah to Yosef. And he was the son of Rachel. By nature, we understand that there is some kind of jealousy. The problem is that this jealousy intensified and became worse and worse because of a certain dream that Yosef had, as though in his dream the sun, as well as the moon, as well as 11 stars are going to bow to him one day. Of course, they understood, Yaakov understood, that it means that even the father and the mother of Yosef and his brothers will one day worship him. They will bow to him. So that was a cause for some kind of anger, especially Yakov, who understood that this could cause some kind of commotion between the brothers and him. So he hollered at Yosef and he said to him, "What do you mean? You mean to say that one day your father and mother, even though the mother was already passed away already, but we will all come and your brothers will all come to bow before you? Who do you think you are?" But the Torah adds, "Ve'aviv shamar et hadavar," and yet Father Jacob kept it in his heart. He knew that there is something into this dream, that this dream probably is a prophecy that will yet to become true. The brothers felt even worse. What do you mean by that? Especially that the Torah tells us that Yosef had the habit to bring to the ears of his father Yaakov some bad things that were committed by his brothers. Well, our sages say that they used to consider some of their brothers who were born to the concubines of Yakov, Bilhah and Zilpah, and they considered them, the children that came from them, even though they were considered among the tribes of Israel, nevertheless the children of Leah, the 6 children of Leah, the 6 tribes that came out from Leah, were considering them like slaves, at least in the understanding of Yosef. So that Yosef brought to his father, and he was telling him also other things that our sages say regarding his brothers. Of course, the commentators explain that Yosef did not mean to be mean towards his brothers, but rather to bring about this news to his father, so that his father will talk to his children, and maybe they will become better because of this. So his intentions were good, in accordance with the understanding of our commentators. But nevertheless, this caused a tremendous hatred that started because of the jealousy that they felt that their father is favoring Yosef, and all this became worse and worse, to the point that unfortunately the plan started to be in their minds to even kill him, to murder their own brother, which later on, they changed because of Reuven, who understood that this is going to be a terrible thing is going to happen, so he saved Yosef from them. And we know that later on, Yehuda himself rose against the idea of murdering him, and rather he says, let's take him and put him in a well or some kind in a hole until we can sell him away as a slave to some of the other, to the Ishmaelim or to the Midianim, and later on to the Egyptians. All this requires much more understanding than that, because it's difficult to understand that brothers, which are known in our tradition as the most righteous people, they would commit such a terrible, such an atrocious act to sell their own brothers. I mean, he was still their brothers, even though he was the son of Rachel and they were the sons of Leah. Nevertheless, they grew up together in the house of their mutual father, Yakov, and that's very difficult to understand. Our sages explain that the brothers felt that the reason why Yakov gave more attention to Yosef, because he was planning that Yosef will be one day the spiritual leader of the nation of Israel. And since they wanted also to be part of the birth of the Jewish people, so they felt terrible about this. Also, they regarded Yosef because he used to bring some of the bad things that were committed apparently by the brothers. He would bring it and tell his father, so they regarded Yosef as a rodef. Rodef means as a person who wants their death. Therefore, according to Jewish law, he deserves death also. That's all. Of course, it's not easy, and it's not enough for us, everything that I said, to explain such a thing that would happen. Therefore, we must go into the work of our sages who told us that, for example, it says in the Gemara, in Masechet Shabbat on page 10, it says there, Al yeshane adam beno leven habanim. One should be very careful never to make a difference between the children. In other words, not to favor one child over the others. Why? שבשביל משקל שני סלעים סמילת שנתן יעקב ליוסף, because of a small additional gift that Yaakov gave to Yosef more than the brothers. That is, of course, the tunic, the beautiful tunic, the colored tunic that he gave to Yosef. Because of this, he gave it more than his other brothers. נתקן ובו אחיו ונתגלגל הדבר וירדו אבותינו למצרים. So our sages said in the Talmud that because of such a difference, because of such preference, that more attention was given to Yosef, that's why jealousy aroused among the brothers against their brother Yosef, and it ended up one thing after another, that finally all of them went to the land of Egypt, which means we know that what happened later, and what is the outcome of all this, that the Jewish people were enslaved for hundreds of years in the land of Egypt, and that's what happened. What I understand from this, it's possible that from this statement that I just mentioned, we can understand what happened. It's impossible to explain the human way the behavior of the brothers of Yosef. It's impossible. There's only one way how that can give us a real explanation, that this is in fact the plan of God, that God wanted it to be this way. He is the one who created this hatred, and all this that happened was so that the Jewish people will have to become slaves in Egypt, so that they will become a special nation with the humbleness that should be in the mind of slaves, and later on would be receiving the Torah. After Hashem will change their mind to be a royal mind from the mind of a slave, as it happened in the mountain of Sinai, the 3 days before they received the Torah, right? And so that the Jewish people will emerge in the world as the nation of God. So Hashem, God, so that there is no other way how to make this happen. He had to do it through the brothers of Yosef. So Yosef would become a slave in the house of Potiphar in Egypt. Later on he would gain, because of his natural honesty and his righteousness, he would gain the confidence of his master Potiphar. Later on, the wife of Potiphar would fall in love with Yosef. Yosef would reject her because he was a righteous man, and he would not betray the trust of his master Potiphar. So the wife Zolecha, the wife of Potiphar, when Yosef rejected her, she took revenge on him by saying to her husband that Yosef is the one who was holding her by force. So Yosef, unfortunately, was put in imprisoned in the worst kind of prison for another 2 years. That's where he had the dream with he interpreted the dreams of Sarah Mashkim and Sarah Ofim, the baker, and the one who we know this as it's brought in the parasha. And finally Yosef was at the end, as we know, the result of all this. He appeared before Paro. He was brought to appear before Paro, as we will read in next week's parasha, Parashat Miketz, and he ended up to become the viceroy of Egypt. From this, little by little, step after step, matter after matter, we all came to be, all the Jewish people, the tribes came to join Yosef in Egypt. Even his own father came to Egypt, and they lived in Egypt several years. And little by little, after the death of their father Yakov, the Jewish people were influenced by the Egyptians. Later on, this started a new wave of hatred against the Jews, and finally the Jewish people were put to slavery in Egypt, which was, of course, after hundreds of years, that was the cause of the Jewish people being redeemed after Egypt with Moshe, our master Moshe, and they stood at the mountain of Sinai to receive the Torah, and that's how we became the Jewish people, the nation of God. All this happened because of this. Now let us conclude by returning again to the beginning. So Yaakov suffered a lot, and before he suffered the less suffering with Yosef, he suffered a lot, as we have explained before. So he wanted to rest a little. Oh no, God says, you are not going to rest now. I'm going to put you in the most terrible misery that you ever have, and the misery regarding Yosef. Why? Because all this is the plan of God. We have to understand that God, when He plans something, it has to be the natural way. In order to preserve the free will, God cannot just make things happen like miracles, right? He has to do it the natural way. And since it was important for the world that the Jewish people would be created, so therefore we had no choice but going through all this, and everything that happened to Jacob happened to the Jewish people. That's what our sages said. What happened to Yakov and Esav will happen also to the Jewish people. The Ramban says that. He says because of this, we have suffered also through more than 2,000 years of exile and hated by all the nations. This hatred is anti-Semitism, and the world still hates us until today. But we believe that this hatred will one day become love again, when they will join with the Jewish people in the recognition of the only God of the world, the God of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.